Hi everyone, this is Kristen from Printable Cuttable Creatables. In today's video, I'm venturing into some new and exciting territory. For the past few months, I've been on the hunt for a laser machine to add to my craft room. My research led me to the xTool M1, which is a laser cutter, engraver, and a blade cutter as well. This machine seemed to fit the bill perfectly regarding size, functionality, and affordability. So when xTool asked if I wanted to try out the M1, it seemed like the stars were aligning and I gladly accepted. In this video, I'll show you step by step how to set up the xTool M1 and how to make your first cuts. If you prefer written instructions, I'll include a link to my blog post below. Alright, so let's get this thing out of the box. The M1 comes in a 5 watt and a 10 watt version. The version I have here is the 10 watt. As we can see, it is packed very well. I received the deluxe package, which includes a rotary attachment tool that allows you to engrave on tumblers and other curved objects. The deluxe kit also includes extra cutting mats to use with the blade cutter and a pretty hefty package of materials to cut with. In this video, I'm only going to focus on the main machine and I'll cover the rotary tool in a different video. Now we can get the machine out of the box, and as you can see, I'm able to lift it and move it around pretty easily by myself. Here, there's some additional packaging to remove. It comes in a plastic bag with a protective film over the lid. I have to say that I do love the look of this machine. It's not too big and bulky or industrial looking, and it fits right in with the other machines in my craft room. When I lift the lid, we can see that there's additional packaging inside. First, an instruction book and a pack of sample materials. In here are the power cords, cutting blades, and exhaust hose for venting. Inside, we have a few more inserts. This one protects the laser module from sliding around during shipping. Here are the triangular prisms, which we'll talk more about later. And here are 2 more cutting mats used for blade cutting. Now we can take a look inside the machine. Front and center is the laser module, and you can also see the gold blade used for blade cutting. Directly above is the camera that gives us a real-time preview of our machine bed. And of course, the laser bed itself, where we place materials, which measures 15 inches wide by almost 12 inches tall. Okay, so now that I have everything unpacked, this is what you would get with the basic package, which is what we'll focus on in this video. We have the cutting mats to use with the blade. Then there's a nice little thank you note with a QR code that takes you to xTool's setup page and the setup instructions booklet. Over here we have the triangular prisms, which are placed on the laser bed to raise up the material and allow air to circulate underneath as you're cutting. And then we have the power cords, a case with 5 cutting blades, and the exhaust hose for venting, and the other parts we need to connect the hose. Finally, we have this pack of sample materials, which I'll use for my first cuts. Now that everything is unpacked, we're ready to get the M1 set up, starting with the venting. To set up the vent, all we need is the exhaust hose, the hose bracket, the hose clamp, and these 4 screws. We don't even need a screwdriver for these, we can just use our hands, which makes things nice and easy. At the back of the machine, place the bracket over the fan vent and align the holes in the bracket with the holes in the machine. Use your fingers to tighten each screw into place. Next, squeeze the clamp and slide it over the bracket. Then take one end of the exhaust hose and fit it over the bracket. Squeeze the clamp and slide it over the hose to secure it tightly in place. Once you have the hose attached to the back of your machine, you can vent the other end out of a window. For now, I'm going to vent this out my sliding door, but when I get the machine set up in my craft room, it'll go out the window. If you don't have a window in your craft area, xTool also sells a smoke purifier unit that you can connect to the other end of the hose to for venting. I'll admit that venting the machine was the part that had me the most nervous, but it really turned out to be pretty easy. So now we're ready to install the blade. The gold blade housing is held in place with magnets, so if you just give it a little tug downward, the blade housing should come right out. There's a little button at the top and a small opening at the bottom. The M1 comes with 5 blades, and if you've ever changed a blade on a Cricut machine, it's the same exact process. This rounded end will fit right into the opening in the blade housing. Remove the protective red cap from the blade, you can see it there, Be careful not to cut yourself as you grab just above the blade. Then press the button at the top of the blade housing, and there's a magnet inside, so you can just place the rounded end into the hole and let it go. You'll see it gets pulled right in, and you can release the button, and now the blade is in. Okay, so this part wasn't mentioned in the written instruction book, but in xTool's video, it says we need to twist the top of the blade housing, this part right here, until just the point of the blade is showing. This took me just a few counterclockwise turns. Once you've done that, your blade is ready and you can go ahead and put it back into the machine. Remember, it's magnetic, so just hold the blade under the opening and it should snap right into place. Next, we can connect the power cords. So plug this end in here, and then the other end goes into the back of your machine, and then the plug goes into the wall outlet. Then connect the square side of the USB cord into the back of your machine. Then plug the other end of the USB into your computer. If your computer doesn't have a standard USB port, then you may need to use a USB adapter. When you flip the power switch on the back of the machine, you'll hear it make a whirring sound, and the light on the front will blink white until it's finished starting up. Then the light will turn solid white. Now we're ready to connect to the software. The software used with the M1 is called xTool Creative Space. Here's the page on xTool's website where you can download it. I'll put a link below. Creative Space is a free download, so you can actually download the program and play around with it before your machine arrives. Choose the right version for your operating system to download and install. I already have the software installed, so here I am in the xTool Creative Space. In the top right, we can see it says Device Not Connected. So I'll click Connect Device. Since I have the USB connected, it found my xTool M1, so I'll just click on here, and the machine will beep, and the light on the front will turn solid blue. Now I can see a preview of the bed of my machine from the camera, which is pretty cool. In the top right, we can see it says USB, and we can click Refresh to refresh the camera to get a new preview. And down here we have some different settings. We have Laser Flat, which is to cut something on the flat bed. Laser Cylindrical, which is to engrave on a curved surface. Open Plane, which is if you have the machine up on the risers to work with a taller object like a tumbler. Then there's Blade Cut, which uses the blade of the cutting machine. And there's Print in Blade Cut, which is printing something on your printer and then using the blade to cut it, like stickers. Here you can set your material, and there's a bunch of preset material settings you can choose from. For thickness, you can auto-measure, or you can manually measure and then type in a specific thickness yourself. Under Height Raised, if the material is flat on the laser bed, then you'll choose No. But if you're using the triangular prisms, then you would select that option. Before I do anything else, I'm going to head up to the settings in the top right here, and under Firmware Version, I'm going to click Check for Updates. And a note did pop up that said the current firmware version is the latest one, so we're good to go. And now I think we're ready for our first project. So for my first laser cut project, I want to cut from wood. So I'm going to go ahead and put in the triangular prisms. These just get placed along the bed of the machine, and they'll raise up the material to allow air to circulate better and prevent some charring. Now that my prisms are placed, I can go ahead and put in the 3mm basewood and just set it down right on top of the prisms. Over on the software, we can see that the camera has picked up my basewood, which is really cool. So now I'll go ahead and grab a file to use for my very first project. I'm going to be a bit daring, and I'll try an earring file from my SVG shop at printablecutablecreatables.com. So I'll go over to the left and click File, Import Image, and I'm going to open up this set of scroll earrings. I'm not going to cut all of them right now. I'm just going to pick one pair to see how the M1 handles some of these more intricate cuts. So I'll go ahead and open this file, and at the time I recorded this, I was using version 1.2 of Creative Space. You can see here that my file opened with orange outlines, which was the default for version 1.2. As I was editing this video, xTool released an update to the software, version 1.3, which added a layers panel and a few other small differences, which I'll call out as we go along. The first difference is that when you open an SVG file in Creative Space, the outline color won't be orange by default. It'll actually depend on the file you're opening. Since this file is going to be cut only, the line color doesn't really matter. If you're using a file with different line colors for multiple operations, like scoring or engraving, the new version of CS will separate the different colors onto different layers, which is a helpful improvement. As I said, I'm not going to be cutting all of these, so I'll select the earrings that I don't want to use and delete them. Then I'll select these two that I do want to cut, and I'll move them up to the top corner of the board for the sake of saving material. I'll leave a little space around the edges just to be safe, and I'll add a little bit of space between the earrings themselves. Now I'm ready to adjust the settings on the right. In this video, I have the design selected, but in the newer versions, you'll need to click off of your design to adjust the machine settings on the right. I'll keep this set to laser flat. For material, I'm going to choose the 3mm base width setting. So now we can see the preset thickness. For height raised, I want to make sure that this is set to triangular prisms. Going back to thickness, I'm going to try out the auto measure and see if it gives me something drastically different. And it did change it a little bit, so I'm going to assume that's more accurate, and I'll go with that for thickness. Now you can select the design to adjust the object settings on the right. By default, all files will come in with all of the lines set to score, so you'll need to change this to the operation that you want to use for your project. If I change this to engrave, we see the lines become a solid filled shape, and if I click cut, they become outlines again. In this older version, the outlines turned purple for cut, but in version 1.3 and newer, the outline color won't change unless you move it to a different layer. So I have this set to cut, and I'm going to leave the rest of these settings as is. It's showing the power set to 100, the speed set to 5, with 1 pass. If you're familiar with a silhouette cutting machine, or if you've tinkered with custom settings on your Cricut, these types of settings might look familiar to you. These settings just tell the machine how much power to use and how fast it should cut, and then passes is how many times to go over the design. Okay, so now I'm going to click the green button at the bottom. On my screen it says Process, but in version 1.3 and newer it'll say Start. On this screen, I can see a preview of the outlines of my design. It says estimated time is less than 1 minute. In version 1.3 and newer, the estimated time has moved to the bottom left corner. So next, I want to click on Framing. In version 1.3, Framing is in the upper right. This message pops up that tells me to push the button on my machine to begin framing. What framing does is it has the laser module map out the design placement before it cuts. I can push the button again to perform framing once more. This should help with accurate placement of the design when cutting. Once framing is done, I can click Framing Complete. And now we're ready to go ahead and press Start. On my screen, there's a pop-up that says to push the button on the machine to begin processing, and not to leave the machine unattended while in use. I'll go ahead and push the button on my machine, and it'll begin cutting. As the machine does its thing, we see on the screen that it says Processing and has a timer of how long the job is taking. In version 1.3 and newer, instead of showing as a pop-up, the prompt will appear on the right side of the screen, and the design preview will remain visible on the left. The processing time is also displayed on the right, which I think is a bit more streamlined. Here we can see the laser doing its thing. While it's cutting, the light on the front will flash in blue. Once the cut is complete, you'll see it says Complete in the software, and it says the total time was about 4 minutes, which is a bit longer than the original 1 minute time predicted. It's typical, by the way, for the machine to take longer to process than the initial estimate, so just keep that in mind. And here we can see how the screen looks in version 1.3 and newer when the project is complete. And it looks pretty good in there, so I'm going to click Done and take it out and see what we got. Okay, so here are the results of my very first cut. And I think it came out pretty good. Everything looks like it cut nice and clean. There is some charring now that we can see here. If we're going to paint these earrings, it won't be a problem, or we can use a fine sandpaper to sand it down. I also have the Air Assist kit, which is an optional add-on that is supposed to blow air away as it's lasering to prevent charring from happening. I wanted to do my first cut without the Air Assist so I can see what it's like, and then I'll do another video where I set up the Air Assist and see what kind of difference it makes. But so far, I would say these came out pretty good. Even in some of the more intricate, tight spots, the machine did a great job cutting. As I clean up these bits of wood in the machine, I can see there's some sticky sap residue on the laser bed and some of the prisms. That's normal, and you can clean that off easily with some isopropyl rubbing alcohol or some soap and water. For my next project, I'm going to engrave the metal dog tag that came in the basic materials packet. I want to do this without the Air Assist installed to see how it does, so as mentioned earlier, I'll make another video after this one showing how to install the Air Assist, and then I'll do a few comparison projects to see if it makes a difference. Since it's just going to be my dog's name on the tag, I'm going to create this design directly in Creative Space. I'll come over to the left and click on the Text tool, and that automatically puts text on the workspace. On the right, you'll see a bunch of text options appear, and this is going to be where you edit your text. You're not going to edit live on the workspace, you're going to edit it in this text box here on the right. So I'll go ahead and type my dog's name, which is Heidi. And then I'm going to choose the font that I want to use. And I've already picked a font that I want, which is called Bangasai, which is a pretty little font that's easy to read. This font is free for personal use from dafont.com. I'll put the link in the description below. I'll make this a little bigger and then press Ctrl+Command+ sign on the keyboard to zoom in a bit. We can see that some of these letters are overlapping, so we need to weld these letters together, which is going to combine them into a single shape. You might already be familiar with that if you've worked with text in Cricut Design Space or Silhouette Studio before. Under Operations, we have this weld option, so I'm going to go ahead and click that. And now you can see that the letters are no longer overlapping. They're now a single shape. Now with the design selected, I'm going to come over to the right and change this from Score to Engrave. Notice that the design changes from outlines to a solid filled shape, which signifies that this is going to engrave. I'll press Command or Ctrl+0 to zoom back out to my starting point. Now I'm ready to turn on my machine so I can get the camera view of the dog tag placed in my machine bed, and then I can size this design properly before engraving it. So here's the dog tag that came with the sample material pack, and I'm just going to place it down into the laser bed. In the software, we can see the camera preview of the laser bed, but I need to click refresh since I just placed the dog tag inside. There we go. Now I can resize this design to fit the dog tag, so I'm just going to click and drag inward on one of these corner handles to scale it down. And then I'll move it into place on top of the dog tag. I'm pressing Command or Control and the plus key to zoom way in here so I can see better as I try to place the design right in the center of the tag. And it looks like my tag is just a bit off center, so I'm going to adjust it in the machine. Now I'll click refresh again to get an updated image. And there we go. That looks pretty straight and centered. I really like having this real-time camera preview. I'll press Command or Ctrl+0 to zoom back out, and now I'm ready to set my materials. On the right, I'll choose Laser Flat. For materials, I'll choose the Silver Bone Dog Tag. And that gives me a preset thickness, but I'm going to go ahead and click Auto Measure and see if that gives me something very different. It did give me a slightly different thickness, so I'll keep that. For height raised, I'll keep that set to no since there's nothing under the dog tag. And it looks like my image shifted a bit when I chose the materials preset, so I'm going to zoom back in and then use the arrow keys to just nudge the design up until it's back in the center of the dog tag. Then I'll press Command or Ctrl+0 to zoom back out, And that looks pretty good, so I think I'm ready to press the green process button at the bottom. Again, if you're in V1.3 or newer, your green button will say Start. Then I'll click Framing, and I'll push the button on my machine to map out the design. Once that's done, the machine will beep, and I'll click Framing Complete. It says the estimated time is 5 minutes, so I'll press Start, and we'll see how long it actually takes. Here's the pop-up that says push the button on the machine to start processing. If you're on V1.3 or newer, this message will be on the right side instead. So now it says complete, and it took just under 8 minutes to do. Let's go check it out. Alright, so here it is. I think it looks pretty good. The lines look nice and crisp. I can see a bit of charring though, so let me give that a quick cleaning. I'm just using some rubbing alcohol to wipe off the charring, and it's coming off pretty easily. So here it is after a little cleaning with some rubbing alcohol, and I think it came out really nice. Here's a closer look. All I did was give it a quick clean with some rubbing alcohol, and the charring came right off. And here's my assistant Heidi modeling her new tag and looking fabulous. So now that I've done a laser cut and a laser engrave, I'm going to play with some of the blade cutting functions, starting with some adhesive vinyl. I'll go to File, Import Image, and I'm going to open up another SVG design from my shop, Printable Cuttable Creatables. And I'm going to choose this Spread Sunshine design because I think it would look nice on the orange vinyl that came with the sample material pack. So I'll open that up in Creative Space, and we can see there are 2 copies of the design on the screen. The top design is layered for paper and the bottom is for vinyl. So I'll select the top one and delete it. I always set up the files from my shop with layering options for both paper and vinyl, so you can choose the one that you need for your project. To get back to the white gridded workspace, I'm going to right-click and choose Hide Background to hide the camera preview and bring me back to the white canvas. So for this design, I want to have the text cut out from the shadow area. So with the design selected, I'll come up to the top, and under Combine, I'll choose Subtract. It's hard to tell what's going on since all we see is outlines, so I'm just going to set this to Engrave for a minute so we can see how this is going to look. Alright, now this is what I wanted, but we're not actually going to engrave, so I'm going to change this setting to Cut. I just wanted to make sure that the Subtract function worked. So now I'm just going to group the file to make it easier to move around, and I'll bring it up to the top corner for material's sake. Then I'll change the size to 3.5 inches tall so it's more of a realistic decal size. I think that's good to go, so now I can load the vinyl into the machine. As we saw during unboxing, the M1 comes with 2 cutting mats, which are used for cutting with the blade. It comes with a pink fabric grip mat and a blue light grip mat. Since I'm going to be cutting vinyl, I'll use the blue light grip mat. So just like Cricut and other cutting machines, there is a protective film over the mat which protects the sticky coating. But unlike cutting machines, there's also a protective film on the back, and the back of the mat is also sticky. This is so you can stick down the mat to the base of the machine to keep it in place. So I'll go ahead and take the film off, and you want to keep the film so you can put it back on the mat when you're not using it. And then I'll carefully place the mat down into the bed of the machine. Now here's the fun orange vinyl that came in the sample pack, and I think I read that this vinyl is actually a bit thinner than the vinyl that you might be used to using with your cutting machine, so just keep that in mind if you're using a different brand of vinyl. You might want to do some test cuts first. Now that I have the vinyl in the machine, I can head to the software and adjust my settings. Since I'm cutting with the blade, I need to set this to Blade Cut. From the list of preset materials, I'm going to choose Removable Self-Adhesive Vinyl. I'll leave all these other settings as is, and of course Cut is the only option with the blade selected, so now I'm ready to click the green Process button. In V1.3 and newer, this will say Start. I'm going to click Framing, and it tells me to press the button on my machine, OK. Once that's done, I'll click Framing Complete. It's estimating about 1 minute to cut. Then I'll come up to the top and click Start, and I'll push the button on the front of my machine to begin processing. Let's take a look and see how it came out. So as I'm pulling this vinyl out, I can see there's a slit at the top where the blade cut all the way through, which is weird, and I'm not quite sure what happened there. This is my very first cut with the blade in the M1, and the rest of it looks like it came out fine. So I wonder if it's a first time use kind of thing. So let's get this weeded and we can see how the rest of it looks. So I'll spare you the pain of watching me weed, and here's the finished vinyl design. Except for that weird slice at the top, everything else came out great. It gave me a perfect kiss cut, nothing cut through the back at all. It's just that weird slice at the top. For now, I'll chalk that up to the first time cut, and I'll keep an eye out for it in my next cuts. Thankfully, the slice didn't actually cut into my design, so I can totally still use this as a decal. So let's move along to another blade cut project. This time, I'll make some print and cut stickers. Print and cut is using your home printer to print an image onto paper, in this case sticker paper, and then using the machine blade to cut around the printed image. For print and cut with the M1, you do need to upload a raster or bitmap image, meaning a PNG or JPEG image, for the images that you want to print. You cannot upload a vector image like an SVG for print and cut because the XCS software only reads the outlines of a vector file, not the actual color information. I'll go ahead and open up a few images that I want to use for my stickers. These are a few more designs from my shop at printablecutablecreatables.com. All of my SVG designs also include a PNG file, so in addition to the cut file, you'll also have a PNG with a transparent background. If it's a text-based design, it'll also have a PNG with a white offset. This white offset is mainly for cutting machines like Cricut and Silhouette that can auto-trace around the white to give you a cut line. For the M1, we need to create our own offset cut lines anyway. So I'm just going to choose the fully transparent version and import it into my workspace. And I'll shrink it down a bit. As you can see, the background of this design is fully transparent. I'm going to go ahead and grab a few more designs to add to my sticker sheet. So this time I chose a version with a white offset, but it's not going to matter too much here, and I'll show you that in a minute. For the last image, I'm going to choose a file that has a white background, and I'm going to show you how you can clean that up and remove the white background right here in Creative Space. When the image is selected, you'll see this panel on the right. I'm going to click on this button that says Edit Image. And that brings us to this separate screen with a few tools here on the right. The first tool on the left that's selected by default is the Magic Wand tool. And then we have an eraser tool and a cropping tool. To remove the white background in this image, I'm going to leave the Magic Wand selected. I'll leave the fuzziness set to 40, and then I'm just going to click on the area that I want to remove. So I'll click on this white, and now it's removed the white areas from the background of this design. I'm pretty happy with this, so I'm going to go ahead and click Save, and that'll bring us back to the workspace where we can see that all the white has been removed from this design. I'm just going to shrink these down a bit. The next thing we need to do is create a cuttable outline around these designs. First, I'm going to make sure to change the setting on the right to Print and Blade Cut. And now I can go in and select these designs. I'm going to select them all at the same time, and up in the top menu, I'll click Outline. For these stickers, I'll use an outline of 0.15 inches, and by default, it's going to have this option to add an inner outline, and what that does is creates these little cuts on the inner parts of the design. I don't want that for my stickers, so I'm going to uncheck that box. Once that refreshes, we can see the inner cuts are gone, and it's only creating an outer offset, which is exactly what I want, so I'm going to click OK. One thing to note if you're going to create outlines for all of your images at the same time, like I did, is that the outlines will all be created as a single unit. These are compound shapes now, and they can't be ungrouped. So just keep in mind that you'll need to have your designs sized and placed just the way you want them before you create those outlines. Or you can create outlines one by one for each design, which will give you the freedom to move each one around separately. I'm going to keep these as is, and I'll just select everything and then click Group at the top so the outlines and the image stay together. And now I'm going to adjust the settings on the right. So under Material, I'll choose White Sticker Paper. And now I can turn on my M1 and load the white sticker paper into the machine. I'll place the sticker paper down right on the center of the blue light grip mat. We don't need to fully stick it down just yet because we're not ready to cut. Back in the software, I'm going to right-click and choose Show Background to see the camera view of the sticker paper in the machine. I'll drag my sticker designs to position them on the paper. I'm just going to shrink them down a little bit to make sure they fit. I'm actually going to make a copy of these designs and click Paste to create another sticker set to fill up the page a bit more. Plus, I have two daughters, so now they can each have their own sticker set and don't have to fight over them. Now we need to make sure that our design is going to fit within the print and cut dimensions, which are just over 7 inches wide by about 10.5 inches long. So we want to make sure our design fits within that area. When I think it's good to go, I'll click the green Process button. Okay, a message popped up at the top that says Max Processing Area 182 millimeters by 269 millimeters, which, like I said, is about 7 inches by 10.5 inches. So it looks like my design is a little too wide. I can shrink these down by either selecting everything and dragging one of the corner handles, or I can just type a specific number into the dimensions at the top to make sure my width is 7 inches. And now I'll click Processing or Start depending on your software version. On the processing screen, we can see our design with some black registration marks added. The machine is going to use these marks so it'll know where it needs to cut. The instructions at the top say that we can go ahead and print the design. So I'll take the paper out of my machine and load it into my printer. Now that my paper is loaded into the printer, I can come back here and click Print. The print dialog comes up. It already found my printer, so I'm going to keep all of these settings as is and click Print. And here's our printed sticker sheet complete with registration marks. Back in the software, we can see the instructions are telling me to place the sticker paper onto the cutting mat and then place the mat into the machine. Since my mat is already in the machine, I'm just going to place the paper centered on the mat within the machine. Now the paper's loaded, so I'm going to click Next, and now we can see a preview of the outlines for our sticker sheet. Everything looks good there, so I'm going to click Framing, push the button on my machine to initiate the framing, and when that's all done, click Framing Complete. And now I can click Start, push the button on the front of the machine, and let it do its thing. Now here's our finished sticker sheet. So the blade of the machine has cut around the outlines that we created for each design. And it looks like these settings gave me a perfect kiss cut. Let's check it out. Looks pretty good. And that's print and cut stickers on the M1. For my final blade cut project, I'm going to cut some faux leather earrings. And I'm actually going to choose a design from the same earring set that I cut earlier from wood. So I've opened up the earring set in my workspace, and again, I'm not going to cut all of these, so I'll select all the ones that I don't want, and I'll hold Shift as I click to deselect the ones that I do want to cut. Then I'll hit Delete, so that leaves me with just the set of earrings that I want. And because these are going to be cut from leather, I'm actually going to make a copy of these so I can glue them back to back and make them double-sided. Now I'm ready to load the leather into my machine. Since we're cutting leather, I'll need to use the pink fabric grip mat, and this one is also sticky on the front and on the back. So I'll peel the film off and place the mat inside my machine, followed by the leather. Now with my leather loaded into the machine and my camera view turned on, I'm going to select the earrings and move them so they're placed within the material. In the settings on the right, I'm going to set these to cut. Then I'm going to come up here and change this from laser flat to blade cut. Under materials, I'm going to choose PU leather. And I'll leave the settings as they are and then click Process or Start depending on your software version. I'll click Framing and go through that process, and when it's done, I'll go ahead and start the cutting. Okay, so let's see how these came out. This pulled right up without any problem, and we can see our earring shapes. So I'll peel one up, and we can see it looks nice and crisp. So all I did here was just use my weeding tool to poke out some of these negative areas, and they just popped right out. And so here's why I cut 4 pieces. I'm going to take these 2 and line them up back to back and glue them together to form an earring that's finished on both sides. And here's my finished earrings. I think these came out really cute. So now with my first few cuts under my belt, I'm happy to say that I'm really loving this machine so far. One thing that made me super nervous about getting a laser was the whole venting process, but it actually turned out to be really easy. I'm very impressed with the clean cuts on my first few projects, and I love the versatility of having the laser and the blade. In all honesty, this machine isn't going to replace my Cricut Maker, but for someone who doesn't have a cutting machine, it's a great place to start. It's also the perfect starter machine for a first-time laser owner like me to get my feet wet with laser cutting. Even after these first few cuts, I'm totally hooked and I can't wait to make more. In my next video, I'll install the Air Assist and see if it makes a noticeable difference in the amount of charring. I'll also play around with the laser scoring feature that I didn't get to try out in this video. If you're looking to add a laser machine to your craft room, or if you're new to the M1 and don't know where to start, I hope you found this video helpful. Feel free to drop any questions in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.